The fallout from the Beirut blast continues. The Lebanese government, including the prime minister, resigned, and now a Beirut cop was killed during clashes with protesters. To talk more about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me via Skype once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, tensions are running pretty high right now in Lebanon.
Yeah, I mean, people are finally demanding the answers that they've wanted for such a long time. And this is the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. For such a long time now, innocent people in Lebanon have been demanding that their government show some daylight between themselves and Hezbollah. And for a very long time, we used to refer to the terrorist group Hezbollah, which I'll remind the viewers is backed by the regime in Iran. That group was a proxy that Iran put into Lebanon to fight its regional wars. We used to call that a cancerous element inside of Lebanon, which the Lebanese people, the government would fight to get rid of. As time went on, Hezbollah became to Lebanon more integral than ever in terms of funding, in terms of getting involved in government groups, in terms of weaponry, in terms of getting actually inside civilian populations and putting up soup kitchens and controlling the airspace, controlling the ports, etc. So that brings us to last week's blast, which inevitably in some manner the responsibility falls into the hands of Hezbollah. Whether it was an accident or not, why was it put there? Why would they put it in a place where they know that it is um, this will detonate, and it can detonate, and it is in a place where it is, civilian populations surround the area, and why was it there to begin with? And the question begs, when will these terrorist groups stop using humans as shields, stop putting weapons in schools, stop using children as shields? And now the Lebanese people are protesting and asking those questions to be answered.
The European Union and the United Nations are calling for an independent probe into the explosion in Beirut, which left over 220 people and more than 5,000 injured. People want answers, but Lisa, will they get any?
Right, and that's the question. When they call for a probe, it's almost like a rhetorical, what happened here? And everyone shrugs their shoulders, whoever's, in charge. The media reports coming out of Lebanon in the hours afterwards said, we don't think it's a terror attack, but at the same time, we will investigate. Well, will you really investigate? Will there be answers? And again, it's a rhetorical only because everyone knows that path will lead them down to knowing and understanding that it might have been an accident. But at the end of the day, the terror group Hezbollah is responsible not only for this, but for so much more. And as we're seeing the resignations come in one after the other, because these individuals, whether it's the prime minister or any other minister, they act as puppets in Lebanon. They know that they've lost the control. They know that the people want answers, and they can't provide them.
International leaders have pledged $300 million to help the people of Lebanon, Lisa, including $5 million here from Canada for humanitarian aid. The world is joining forces and coming to help with some much needed relief.
Yes, absolutely. When something like this happens, we look at the people of Lebanon as people who need help, and when they can't get it from their own government, when they can't get the answers, or they're short-staffed, or I remember in the minutes after the explosion, the first reports I was seeing online was for blood donations and for, the hospitals to make room for those that would be coming in. They had no idea what the size of the casualties would be, how many people would have to have hospital beds. And again, this is something that the world community comes together for. But I will tell you, an interesting part of this is Israel was one of the first nations that pledged or volunteered to help, and they received an answer of silence from their Lebanese neighbors.
Wow, interesting. Now, in a rare joint stand, 6 Persian Gulf Arab nations back extending a UN arms embargo on Iran. Tell me more about that.
Finally, right? So, in the days or months after Donald Trump became president, he was the first to turn his back on the Iran nuclear deal that was so popular among the European nations, first and foremost. But we got a lot of funny faces from the Arab nations, from the European nations, who were hoping to somewhat normalize relations with the Iranian regime. But now, as time has gone by, we have seen the inconvenient truths of this reality that Iran is marching forward with its nuclear program, with the consumption of arms, with egregious human rights violations, with taking Western hostages, and nothing has changed. So now the Arab nations have joined the US and others in calling out in Iran and saying the sanctions will not be removed until we see some behavioral changes.
Two former U.S. Green Berets were sentenced by a Venezuelan court, Lisa, for 20 years in prison for their role in a botched attack in May aimed at toppling President Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah, so the Venezuelans are on to the Americans in that they want to create the regime change that they did not see happen months ago in Venezuela. Maduro became even more ironclad in his reign over the country and more bold to punish those who seek to remove him. And this was called Operation Gideon. These two admitted to working with a third um, military member here in the United States on this project, and now 20 years. I'm sure that there will be action taken by the United States to use any diplomatic means possible to work with neighboring countries to get these individuals released.
Lisa, Afghanistan is set to release 400 hardcore Taliban detainees to kick off peace negotiations between the government and the militant group. President Ghani allegedly met with more than 3,000 regional Afghan leaders in Kabul last week to discuss the potential releases. I mean, that can't be good, releasing those who belong to a terrorist group.
Right, exactly right. And Hal, you're one of the few journalists who actually keeps an eye on Afghanistan. Most people have forgotten about Afghanistan. Are we still there? Do we even have assets in Afghanistan? Does anybody care about Afghanistan? Afghanistan has always been the abandoned child of the Middle East. It's always been occupied. It's always been war torn, and the people of Afghanistan suffer as a result. And now the West looks to the Taliban, a terror organization which they know is a terror organization, as the only hope for some sort of semblance, meaning that they have the resources, they have the control, they have the ability, and they're expansive enough to take the future of Afghanistan into their arms. And they are, again, proving to us that they are only a terror organization. Any ceasefire that has been put into place as of recently has been broken immediately. They have enough terrorists on the streets of Afghanistan already, causing suicide bombings at weddings, at ice cream shops. You and I have talked about this weekly. And now, when you read that headline, it gives me the chills that 400 of their worst are going to be released ahead of any sort of deal on their behalf, on any action on their behalf to make this deal go forward. So, good luck to the people of Afghanistan. And my heart really goes out to them in what looks like, that there's no resolution in getting them some sort of peaceful future.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, that's incredible. Lisa, the United States is reviewing its military deployments in the Indo-Pacific region to ensure it has enough firepower and troops to counter any threat from China.
Countering China is like playing whack-a-mole. We don't know where to look or how to do it, but we got to be where they are, because it seems like we are being proven to that they are always going to be one step ahead, whether it's in the hacking world or in terms of the tariff war between the West and China, and now with their beefing up of assets on the seas. Look, China has had this chess game going on for a very long time. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly where to beef up their assets and to expand their control of the region, whether it's invading Hong Kong, having more control there, or the seas. They are beefing up their assets. The United States has decided, to, measure for measure, we will be your shadow and we will beef up our assets to be able to counter this threat of China.
Now, closer to home, the riots continue in Portland, Oregon. We see the images. It's just devastating. All of the rioters, the protesters, businesses being torched. And a police union building was even set on fire. Lisa, will we ever see an end to the protests?
No, and add to that Chicago. Overnight, we saw Chicago being burned down, being burned down. I mean, there is a loss of control in both of these places. And, Seattle, we saw just a few weeks ago. And here in Los Angeles, we had crazy protests, but it's ongoing. It's ongoing. And in Chicago, for example, the impetus was that police fired at a man who was armed, who was actually armed. mean, what these protesters are doing, they're causing such a fear of the reverse fear for the police to have fear of the people and not the people to have fear of the police. It's just absolute anarchy. It's lawlessness. Here in Los Angeles, for example, if you are now, if someone robs your home or if you're in a car accident, but it's not an active scene, they don't even send police out anymore. And now, with these types of protests, police will think twice before acting aggressively in order to counter an aggressive person. And for ordinary citizens, that doesn't make me feel safe, and I know it doesn't make others feel safe. But these protesters, there is a momentum here, and there's a falsified social justice movement to correct something that they have incorrectly perceived as being unjust. And I think it's going to be a while before we see this extreme situation go back to at least some sort of normalcy. And before that happens, we're going to see a lot of burnt down police stations, a lot of burned American flags, and a lot of regrets, I think.
How can people in a lot of these regions even feel safe, especially when there have been calls, even by city officials, saying we're going to defund the police? If anything, they should add to the budget, the police budget, and bring in more police officers to protect the people in those regions. Seattle, Portland, Chicago, it's unbelievable. Meanwhile, protests have erupted in Belarus after Europe's last dictator claims election victory, Lisa.
Yes, of course he claims a victory. He's the dictator, right? This is a fighting chance for the people of Belarus who had a pro-democracy opposition leader who they were hoping would win an election, and of course, the incumbent dictator comes out and claims victory. So people are on the streets. Right now, we're seeing a lot of protests, regardless of whether it's for social justice movements or in many cases around the world, we're seeing a lot of protests in the aftermath of elections. People are either, it's because of COVID that they are claiming that these elections are fraudulent or that they, were somehow rigged or that people couldn't come out or they didn't have access to voting. And on the other hand, they're home and they are, their time is more freed up, so they are able to come out and protest. So COVID has played a very large role in how people perceive things. It's played a very large role in global protests, and it's played a very large role in elections. And I know here in the United States, we have a very important election coming up in less than 90 days, and people are worried about the same, that COVID will play a role in either in some sort of cheating happening or ballots not getting into the right hands or people not being able to mail things in a timely fashion. So that conversation is very much alive, and it's fluid. I think as time goes on, people who are in charge will have to reassure people that this will be a free and fair election. And I think around the world, we're seeing that there can be a very, very significant aftermath if
Should
it
be
isn't.
interesting to see how it transpires, definitely. Lisa, new stats have come out in regards to COVID-19 infections, and the United States now has over 5 million infections.
Yes. So our second wave has actually been interesting. So the people that I talk to that are on the front lines say that the cases are not as serious. They are hitting a younger population or age bracket. We're not seeing as many deaths. So the number of cases has gone up. The number of deaths per day have gone down. And hopefully we're seeing this end. Some people don't even call it a real second surge. Many of those people are also pushing for schools to reopen, and unions and others are not. For example, here in California, the governor is an absolute no. He's also, related to Nancy Pelosi. We don't know if this is a political case. We don't know if this is a matter of health, but the numbers show a different story. What's unfortunate here is that COVID exists, and it's very, very, tragic for those who have been hit by it. But at the same time, we look at the businesses that will never reopen. You look at how many for lease signs there are in brick and mortar shops that have shut down indefinitely. And then you look at the children that won't be able to go back to school and have that sense of normalcy and being around other children and actually getting that experience of real classroom. And this is the other side of COVID. So I think it's a real conversation that we're going to be having months going forward. But yes, we've hit that 5 million number, but thankfully the number of deaths have also come down.
Well, the depression and anxiety rates are also going through the roof with everybody being isolated right now. Stay home, stay safe, as they say, but at the same time, mentally, it's taking its toll. Now, Lisa, are we getting any closer to seeing a vaccine? Last time we chatted, labs, of course, where you are, and in Israel, we're getting pretty close.
Yes, people, and now we're hearing of reports of labs elsewhere, like in India and Indonesia, also wanting to compete in this, very, very um, healthy, competitive endeavor of coming up with a vaccine. But I think, as you put it right before you asked your question, is that, we were told to stay put and stay safe until we flatten the curve, not until we find a vaccine. And I think many people are looking forward to that vaccine, thinking, well, that is when the world will go back to normal. Well, no, not really. We don't even know what that vaccine will be all about. And many people will, refuse to inject themselves with something that has not been shown, in a long term case study to be, healthy or effective or what have you. So I think that, while many eyes are on the vaccine story, it will be a while before people are truly confident that this vaccine is the way forward.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thank you, Lisa, and stay safe.
You too.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.